Welcome to another episode of 40 Minutes in the Old Testament. 40 Minutes in the Old Testament is a 1517 Podcast Network podcast. You can go to 1517.org/podcast. Check out all the other podcasts that are living over there. And while you're over there, of course, check out everything else that 1517 is doing. All those academies and articles and videos and events, all that stuff. While you're checking it all out, of course, you can go over to the right-hand corner, hit that donate link, and become a contributor to 1517 to keep all that stuff free. That's how that works. And so if you are able to do that, we'd appreciate it. If you already do that, we very much appreciate it. You do make all of what we do possible. We are in Isaiah chapter 37. We got through most of it, and Hezekiah is heard some bad news. He's got some guys breathing some threats. They're telling him some bad things. They're trying to scare his people, and Isaiah has some words for Hezekiah, which is basically like, yeah, I know he's talked a big game and everything. How about you don't worry about it? Because I got a message from the Lord that says that none of that's going to come to pass. In fact, I'm going to put a little ring in his nose, grab him by that ring and just lead him around where I want, which is, of course, just a way of saying men make kings, but God basically determines how all of this stuff shake out. And this is where we ended by God telling Hezekiah through Isaiah that I'm gonna do some deliverance for you.
Yeah, so picking up in 33, just continuing with the same thought, we're going to hear what God has to say about any military plans that the king might have for the city of Jerusalem. And then we'll wrap it up with hearing about the fate of his army as well as his own personal fate. That's kind of the way the chapter ends. So we just heard in verse 33 that out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, out of Mount Zion abandoned survivors, that zeal from God is going to accomplish this. And then he continues in verse 33 saying, therefore thus says the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into this city, or shoot an arrow there, or come before it with a shield, or cast up a siege mound against it. All these traditional ways, of course, that cities were attacked. Instead, by the way that he came, by the same he shall return, and he shall not come into this city, declares the Lord. So maybe you're saying, oh, why is all this going to happen? Is it because Hezekiah is such a great king, or is it because the people inside Jerusalem have really been righteous? Why is God going to do this? Well, he says in verse 35, for I will defend this city to save it for my own sake. And, you might think that would be the period, but it's not. For my own sake and for the sake of my servant, David. Now, we've heard this language elsewhere. The same language is used, in fact, in the parallel narrative to this in 2 Kings. I think we've heard it one other place, too. So what does this mean? Well, the first part is obvious. I mean, God does things for his own name's sake or for his own sake all the time, right? He's doing this on the basis of who he is. His own righteousness, his own holiness, his own name. All that is familiar terminology to us. But we also have this latter part, and for the sake of my servant, David. Now, this is not in reference to David's piety or David's righteousness. It's not because David was such a great king. On the basis of that, I'm going to save the city of Jerusalem. What he's talking about is all the promises that he made to David, all the promises God made to David, that he would preserve his dynasty. Remember, all the way back when David wanted to build a house for God, what did God say? Thanks, but no thanks. I've got a better idea. I'm going to build a house for you, this dynastic house. So this is basically, you could say this differently. You could say it for my own sake and for the sake of the Messiah. That's another way of saying this. So when he says, for the sake of my servant David, that's biblical shorthand for the sake of all the promises that I made to David, all of which are centered around the preservation and the building of a kingdom for him, upon whose throne will sit the son of David, the Messiah himself. So this is another way of saying, basically, for my own sake as the father, and for the sake of my son, I will save the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah, if I was going to add onto the Bible, which of course I'm not, don't worry. But if I was going to do like a little side note here, like if I was going to do the paraphrase, So when God says, "Hey, I'm going to do something for my own sake, and then for the sake of David," which is my promises, like this, so this is the sort of same thing. When God does something for His own sake, He does it for the sake of who He is. That He's the God that can't lie and stuff. So I might add, "I will defend this city and save it for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David." But I repeat myself.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, a distinction without a difference, right? Yes. And then I hadn't really thought about this until it's one of the beauties of having a Bible study with someone else. As you're talking your way through, all of a sudden things will leap out at you didn't see before. So this is just perfect. Perfect segue into what's coming next, because the very next verse mentions the very guy, Savior, that we've been talking about. Because the next line says, "And the messenger of the Lord." Well, we know who that is. I mean, if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time whatsoever, especially if you've been with us, if you've been one of those stalwart listeners through the whole decade, right? You've heard plenty about who the messenger of the Lord is. We meet this messenger in Genesis 16, hear much more about him in the book of Exodus. This is, in fact, the very unique messenger who is, in fact, not just sent by God, but is God. It's the Son of the Father. So we just heard about, for the sake of my servant David, meaning the Messiah. Well, here we have this same figure, the messenger of the Lord, the Son of the Father. What does he do? Well, he goes out to battle. This is the same picture we have in Revelation, right? Jesus as the warrior. He's riding astride his war horse. He's got his two-edged sword sticking out of his mouth. He goes out to destroy the enemy of the people of God, and so that's the same thing he's doing here. Jesus has a long military pedigree of destroying the forces of evil. So here, the messenger of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. So quite a slaughter. One messenger, one sword goes out, wipes out all the Assyrians. So Sennacherib, who's the Assyrian king, he left, he departed, and returned home, and lived at Nineveh. And this is a flash forward here. We're just reading this verse by verse, sentence by sentence, so we can be excused for thinking this happens immediately. Actually, it's not going to happen for another 20 years. But what will happen down the road is that he's worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god, and two of his sons, Adramelech and Sharezer, struck him down with the sword. And after they escaped into the land of Ararat, then Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. So much for all the boasting of the king of Assyria. He ends up being defeated by the messenger of God. He goes home, and of all things, he falls by a sword that's in the hand of none other, not his enemies per se, but his own two sons. And so goes the glory of earthly kings. God defended his city for his own sake, for the sake of his servant David.
Yeah, I mean, there is something kind of awesome. So you could, you can kind of read this as, so God's saying he's going to defend the city. He's going to save it. It's not just that he's going to defend it. He's going to save it too, because that's also what he does. He's a God who works salvation. Do that for his own sake, and then says, and for the sake of my servant David. And then you could read this. So right after saying, hey, I'm going to do that for the sake of my servant David. And then the son of David went down and struck down 185,000 people. Right.
Yeah, it's once you get this Old Testament Christology, it's just it fits together. You can see these smooth transitions from one to the other. Yeah, the son of David just goes out and wipes them out.
Yeah,
like nobody's business. And it's so fitting too where he dies. This guy has, he's boasted about himself basically doing divine things. He thinks he's a God incarnate. And here he is in the house of his God. And that's where he dies. He dies in the very house of idolatry. So in the end, his gods and he himself as God is an utter disappointment and, meets the fate. Like we have often said, quoting, what's his name? It'll come to me in a minute. But you resemble what you revere. G.K. Beale. you resemble what you revere.
Yeah.
So you worship that which is dead, guess what you become? Dead. You worship that which is empty, guess what you become? Empty. So that's what happened here to the Assyrian king. All right, well, look at us finishing a chapter.
Hey.
that was only 5 or 6 verses, but still, we finished a chapter.
Success.
Now we got another one coming up. We got 38 coming up, and just to kind of give you a bit of a preview here. So this is you got to read these next 2 chapters in tandem. I don't know if we'll get to all of it in one episode, probably not, but they're intended to be read in tandem because you got really 2 different perspectives going on here. You got chapter 38, which is going to talk about Hezekiah getting sick. And Isaiah, first of all, says, well, get ready because you're going to die. And then Hezekiah prays. God answers his prayer. Hezekiah has basically this song or psalm in which he, first of all, laments and then rejoices over God giving him the healing. God gives him 15 more years of life. So we see a good side of Hezekiah here, because when he's afflicted, what does he do? When he's facing death, what does he do? Well, he turns to the Lord. And as a result of that, God is gracious, compassionate to him, heals him, gives him a good word, and he recovers. All right, so that's 38. Now, the dark side, the flip and dark side of that is what's going to happen in chapter 39. Because here you have the not so good side of Hezekiah showing, because what's going to happen is you have representatives, ambassadors from Babylon, that city that we hear so much about in the scriptures. Babylon show up. And not only do they have presents for Hezekiah, but they have letters, which we'll talk about when we get there. No doubt letters basically wanting Hezekiah to join them in a coalition against the Assyrians. Hezekiah welcomes them. In fact, he kind of feels, like he's some